Thom is how I spell it. Well, you see
Oh,
that on the book, but yeah.
yeah, well, welcome everyone. I'm Edwin Rutsch, Director of the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and we're here to talk about empathy with Thom Bond. Thanks for joining me for this discussion and dialogue.
Yeah, thanks for asking me to be here. Actually,
Well, maybe I can start with giving a little intro. So, you're the founder of New York City Nonviolent Communication,
yeah.
the group there. You are author, yay, of this book. Congratulations! I know it's a lot of work. Of the Compassion book,
Yes.
lessons from the Compassion course. We want to talk about that, as well as want to talk about your Compassion course. So, in terms of introduction, do you want to say anything else about
No, I
yourself?
think you got me covered. I mean, that really is a lot of what I'm trying to stay focused on. To simplify my existence and yet stay going. So, really, I just do the course. The book I'm working on, I have a podcast also called Engineering Peace, which is kind of the current events version of what we talk about in the book and in the course. That way, we keep the course and the book just the same, so that we're all studying the same thing. And then any, like I said, current events or anything like that, we address. Well, certainly in the conferences, but also in the podcast. So I've done
Hmm.
podcasts on, how to use needs awareness, in our COVID environment, things like that. I've been working with a couple of gentlemen who we've been doing some work around the Black Lives Matter kind of really doing a lot of exploration around that to see, uh, yeah, where do we go? I mean, that was just such an interesting, still is, such an interesting pursuit. Uh, and, I mean, I think we've gained a lot of ground actually in terms of being able to empathize with ourselves and one another, and then I love it. I'm an engineer. My background is in engineering, and so I love the idea of thinking of stuff and doing things, making real things happen in the world. And empathy is the best way I know of, right? Needs awareness, I like to call it, is the best way I know of to understand what's happening around us, in that human realm. And so, yeah, I guess I would add that.
Great. Yeah. So you're applying the empathy and the compassion and the nonviolent skills to addressing current issues. Black Lives Matter. How about like the political? What's been happening with the left right? Uh,
That's about to happen. That one's
okay.
coming out. They
Mm-hmm.
brew. My podcasts brew. And when they're ready, they come out. But yeah, we're definitely addressing that. I, there's, I can't imagine a better application uh, than looking at our divide as a nation and really understanding empathically where that comes from, because we're just so every time politics happens, it's politics on fire kind of thing. And I would just um, I would love to see more empathy on both sides, frankly.
Yeah.
um, and uh, and find a third side, and that's we've lost sight of the third side, I believe, because we got so wound up in competing and being right and wrong and the like, winning. And I think we just almost lost sight of the third side, of governance, even, that um, we could make that there are a lot of things that don't need to be political. They're humanitarian, you could say, and that's what I that's what the podcast is going to be about. It's
Mm-hmm.
just be about how do
Cool.
we recoup that, how do we bring that. So
Well,
yeah,
you.
and even
Mm-hmm.
in my work with Reverend Dr. Uh, Michael Christie, who we've been doing an ongoing dialogue with, who's a black gentleman who's a chaplain in a prison. And we've really had this kind of developing a very what's the word I'm looking for? It's just generated a lot, the conversation, and so we're really starting to identify things. And again, I love this idea of engineering piece. That if we find the right, if we find where things are not working, we can figure out how to address them. And let's take this massive situation we have in the United States when it comes to race. How do you look at such a huge thing? It's so complex. There's so many parts. There's all this history. And there is a way to look at it simply. And what we've kind of came up with is what's happening everywhere is fear, actually. And and for those of us who studied, the human condition a bit, we can see that fear, you could be the best trained police officer or the best trained demonstrator, and hold nonviolence as a key to your existence, and yet put us in a space where we're scared, where everybody's experiencing fear, and that all goes away. All the training, everything we ever did is like, it's just gone. And so one of the things we came up with just through this vision of needs is the idea for safety for everybody. And until we have that, there's no point in skipping over that, right? It's not like, yeah, we need this, and no, we need this, and if we don't create it, nothing else is going to happen.
So creating a way to address the fear. And would you say, I've been, thought about fear that, that empathy, there's sort of responses to fear, like you can fight, you can flee, or you can freeze. And I think that empathy is actually a fourth response to fear, is to be able to sense into it, be present with it, and to go into sort of the felt experience of it and hear it. Yes. And that kind of transforms it. So
yes, not necessarily in the heat of the moment, which I think is very important. The idea that, like I said, I could be very well trained, and if I'm in a critical position where my life is in danger, or I believe my life is in danger, I am not going to be an empathic creature. I'm just not. My brain is so busy closing those circuits down and opening the other ones. So I still want to have an idea of dealing with this, right? I don't want to say, oh, well, I'm in fear and therefore there's nothing to do. So we wanted to look at, well, what's under that, right? Not just in the moment, but what's, under fear in general, or what's generating that. And it's funny because the answer was given to us 50 years ago or 40 years ago by Martin Luther King, who said, well, the reason we fear each other is because we don't know each other. And the reason we don't know each other is because we don't communicate. And as soon as we really put that together, it made so much sense. I mean, look at the United States. There are several countries here. It just looks like it's one big country. But if you really looked at where's the black area, where's the white area, where's the Hispanic area, it's like we divvied it up. And that and because of that, we don't know one another. And because we don't know one another, we fear one another. And because we fear one another, it's very difficult to have empathy for one another. So just really unpeeling it, right? Just looking.
Trying to get to the core, like what is really causing the fears? What's sort of the source of the fears? And it's just that people aren't really communicating and hearing each other.
Yes.
And so the question, I guess, then becomes, as an engineer, is like, how do we address, how might we get people to know each other and hear each other?
Funny you should ask.
I happen to have a solution.
Well, like I said, I'm an engineer. And by definition, we like to solve problems by using technology. And so the tech that I like to use is the tech that you like to use, actually, which is what I call needs awareness. And that is that when we're aware of our own and each other's needs, we simply become more compassionate. It's science. A equals B. And so that's a big piece of how we want to approach this. And so literally it becomes, okay, so how do we get to know one another? How do we break through that? Look at that, specifically. And we're in the process of developing. I'm also working with some other folks. Reverend Caldwell, I was working with him, who is as he would call himself, a foot soldier in the civil rights movement in the 60s. He's the guy standing to the right of Martin Luther King on the bridge in Selma. And we were just really trying to scheme, like, what can we do in the big picture, because we do have such a big problem. And one of the things is to have a simple solution. When you have a very complex situation, ideally you want to have a simple solution that's adaptable to a lot of to the situation. So you're getting, it's just the most efficient way to do it, as opposed to having complex things trying to solve complex problems. And so, as I suspect you would agree with me, this is a very simple idea, that when we can become aware of our own and each other's universal human needs, very specifically, right? That it changes the experience that we're having as humans and allows us to do things that or introduces us to thoughts that we just wouldn't even have otherwise. And so that's the thing that we want to accomplish. So how do you do that? It's interesting, in this country, we've had organizations before who have attempted to really serve the social needs of the country. Granted, they haven't turned out that well, one of them being the Boy Scouts, which is an international movement to create a shared reality among folks to help kind of have a more life-serving life. There was an organization called the YMCA or the YWCA. Again, it's a thing that's everywhere. And so we're thinking that we need a new thing like that. That's not the YMCA, it's not the Boy Scouts, but it has that operates on that same model, that what if you create something that works locally but actually has a national or international network, and more importantly, a template that we know is tried and true and works. So we're looking at that. What does that look like? Does it look like workspaces? Does it look like we're looking at a farm, a demonstration farm, for example, as a way of creating a venue and for people to kind of rally around and get to know one another.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing there is you're kind of looking at creating some kind of organizations where people could sort of connect with each other, kind of like the Boy Scouts was, or the YMCA. And you're kind of in a sort of an exploratory sort of a mode, like just kind of brainstorming on that. One thing that's of interest to me is kind of to go back, you talked about needs,
Yes.
and when like I'm like empathy, we listen. So it's, Center for Building a Culture of Empathy. So I sort of put empathy front and center as a social value. And I see that as sort of the way that we sense into where other people are. Like, if someone's afraid, I'm like sensing into their fear, hearing their fear, sensing their fear, and then maybe seeing what's behind that fear. You're coming from the NVC, Nonviolent Communication community, that uses the term needs for sort of feelings, values that people have sort of behind that feeling of fear, that you're trying to hear what that is. I tend to use the word feelings, like behind the feeling of fear is a feeling of maybe wanting to feel safe, or wanting to have that sense of connection. You feel disconnected. Yeah. And so you might be using the term need for that feeling of connection, or and I would just say it's a feeling. So I don't use the words need so much as maybe a
Yeah.
value, or maybe they feel like, oh, I like a feeling of fairness, and something here feels unfair, and that makes me afraid that I'm not gonna, be
Yeah.
heard and seen. So
Yes.
maybe we could kind of explore that space of the
Oh,
sensing into, and
yes.
how do we sense into that fear, and what's the
Yeah.
dynamics of what happens there?
Well, I love what you're saying, and I also there's a kind of a a danger in using that word needs just to with regular civilians who haven't really studied needs awareness or nonviolent communication or compassionate communication. So and that's a big part of my course. I mean, I talk about needs for a year. Okay. Um, but it's not it's we're really redefining the word, and the one that really works for me is life energy, right? The idea that these are that needs are actually the impulses of life that we experience. They're not cars and jobs and things like that, which I get our brain could go to that very easily. However, when we can train ourselves to really be aware of this energy outside of all the things that remind us about it in life, we can start to understand that needs have a life of their own that express themselves through us. And I think the big part of empathy, and maybe you could bear me out here, is the layering of needs, the relationship of one need to another need, and to yet another need, and this amazing kind of tapestry of needs that we all live inside and live through us. And it's to me, it's all about being able to really distinguish that energy separate from, like I said, from the strategies of life, to be able to just say, what is just that need? And the reason I like to do that, and again, I'm guessing you could bear me out here, is that when we think that way, we become incredibly creative. It just unlocks this possibility when we're looking at the need versus the strategy. For example, if I'm looking at a strategy, and we'll take it extreme, right? Like, let's say I'm just looking at a strategy, then I have two choices. And so if I'm looking at, well, what need am I trying to meet with this strategy? And I'm going to back up, and then I'm going to say, what is that? My three favorite words, by the way. It's going to be, well, I'm really wanting, let's say, companionship or something, right? That there's something that I've identified. How many ways are there, on this planet to find companionship? My number is 10,000, by the way. That's the one I go with. And so that there are 10,000 ways, right? The corollary is 10,000 ways to meet any need. The thing is, if we don't detach the need, if we can't see the impulse of life, identify, relate to that need as a life energy, we end up having our focus on strategies. And so this is for me, it's an engineering process, in fact, right? What are we doing? Well, we're looking at what needs to work that's not working right now. And the way us humans do that is, or can do that, is through this vision of needs. And all the feelings that accompany them, right? That are there to help us, which I really believe this, that our feelings exist in order to help us understand how we are, how we're doing, how our needs are, how life energy is moving through us.
So
And
in this
yeah,
moment, if I can just interrupt, what do you
no,
what
please.
is your feeling and your need in this moment? If you sort of sense into your own body, what are
Yeah.
you sensing is a need here in being with me in the moment?
Well, the first one is excitement. And I know that has to do with, um, well, for one thing, self expression. You're giving me the opportunity for that, which also is part of my need for contribution. I love to contribute to people. I just love it. It makes me feel great. And the other thing is gratitude. Having finally met you after we've been ships passing in the night in the NVC world anyway for decades, I suspect. And I've always had a tremendous just basically a sense of gratitude for you, for the work you've done, because I know you get on the ground and really try to make this a real thing, not just a nice idea. And so that's all kind of cranking with me right now.
Okay, so I'm hearing one of your needs that you're having is to contribute to others, and you were mentioning the felt experience of that need.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm familiar with that need too. It's like kind of it's like there's a feeling of openness and sort of a outflowing and sort of a feeling of care, and then there's almost like a celebration when I see someone sort of something that they feel that contribution, something that has been contributed to them, and there's sort of a sense of openness and
Sure.
engagement or something. It's kind of like beautiful experience.
Well, meaning,
Mhm.
purpose, connection, right? All these little intertwined, needs that come along with all that. And it's funny. I think about my needs as not coming and going. I look at them as always, always there. And what changes is how met they are. They're always there. And, but I will notice, and that's what I love about feelings, is they will tell me. That's why what is that is my three favorite words, or are my three favorite words, because that's my signal to feel my body and then ask myself, what is that? What is that? Right? And that's where I invite myself to understand myself on a life energy level. What is that? It's my need for, and it's usually a chorus or a chord, right? It's not one. It's, it, like we just said, there's contribution, there's connection, meaning, purpose. So all these things, self-expression, right? They all work together inside of us to create these impulses that we get to figure out what we want to do with.
Yeah, for me, I don't know if clarity, you would consider clarity a need. For me, there's a
Yes.
feeling like I'm trying to hear what you're saying, and I'm trying to put it into a coherent, clear sort of a model. And there's a certain feeling of, oh, the pieces all kind of fit together and kind of make sense. And that's sort of one of the feelings I kind of look for, is like, let's get some, for example, there's a little bit of, for me, that I don't really use the words needs so much. I sometimes will address it, but for me, the feeling that the need is actually a feeling that we desire. So versus, I'm trying to understand, is a feeling to you almost like an existential
Oh, I love this. I'm so
embodied
happy we're talking
sense,
about this, Edwin.
or is
So,
it embodied kind of?
um, to me, it's like the way I could say it is, first of all, we're in a symphony of needs. We're all in a symphony of life energy. And so let's just say needs are like the instruments and feelings are like the sounds that come from the instruments. And that we are, and the reason I, yeah, and I love the idea that all feelings come from either the metness or not metness of my needs. So they're actually born, right? My feelings are born out of this relationship that my mind and body has to how I'm doing, right? Like, what are the impulses of life that I have, and then which ones are really being, taken care of and not. And feelings is the way I find that out. It's one of the ways. Another way I find out is through judgment. Like, I notice if I'm judging, if I have moralistic judgments, I always, or if I'm angry, for example, like I know that's another sign for me to ask myself, what is that? When I'm, feeling, maybe even hostile towards somebody. Like the first question to me is when I feel that in my body, which is the first signal mainly that I get. That's my cue to ask, what is that? And then when I ask, what is that, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm giving myself empathy, right? And I'm trying to figure out what is the impulse of life that feeling is telling me about. And
So if there's someone you're meeting, it's like, oh, I don't like them. You're kind of feeling kind of off. You're kind of sensing into that feeling of, I sense I'm feeling off, and there's something here, and kind of what's sort of underneath that. Why,
yeah,
where is that sort of coming from? Is that sort of what
yes,
I hear?
yes. And the thing that I like about the work that we do is it's not just about feeling. It is actually about thinking too. And what I love about that is we all, us humans, have amazing minds, amazing brains, right? I mean, look at us. And so I love this idea of having a partnership. Like, I don't want to kick out my brain. And maybe you've heard somebody, people say, oh, he's really in his head,
Mm-hmm.
like that's a bad thing. It's like, no, sometimes that's exactly where I want to be. And not that it's a bad thing to be in my head, but it's a wonderful thing, and it's a wonderful thing when my head and my body, right, my heart, for is how we say it, can get together, and both function together. It's not one or the other, and that's what I love. That's what Marshall Rosenberg did, right? That's what, for me anyway. He articulated. A set of conditions that we all experience all the time. He did it through a model, as we know, a language model, and taught people, which I considered the hard way to learn, actually, as did Marshall. And he wasn't wild about the model. He wasn't wild about even the term nonviolent communication.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't like the term either. I won't use it because it's too, yeah.
it's
It
loaded.
negates something instead of. I think it should have been called empathic communication myself. It would, because you're sharing what it is instead of saying what it is not. And
Right.
I did hear him say that too in recordings, that he didn't like the term. He got kind of stuck with it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I wrestle with this because there's a couple of reasons. In just terms of me wanting to be able to talk to people about this, I don't want to turn them off the minute I start talking to them. And so, and in America, by the way, we have a particular problem. And that is that, after the Emancipation Proclamation here in this country, there was a huge effort to characterize people of color as being violent. And that's why they needed to, excuse me, that's why that was the concept that, well, we need to put them back in jail. And by the way, when you're in jail, you can work for free on a farm. So it was this desperate attempt to, to regain I have a lot of empathy for the folks who lost their entire economy, you know, but this kind of pervasive characterization came out of, whether it was during Jim Crow or the Black Codes or, before that. So the idea of saying, would you like to be in a class about nonviolence? It's like, you're doing it to me again. And even, people, even white folks I've noticed say, well, I don't need that. I'm not violent, right? And so I think it's a problem. And that's why I call it needs-based relating.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I call it. It's needs-based relating. And so the way I teach it, and this was, by the way, at Marshall's request, he was like, how can we teach this? How can we teach this some other way? And so, I'm not the first person to do it. There were a bunch of us who said, let's teach the awareness. Let's teach the consciousness. So now I break it down, and that's what the course was about, and that's what the book is about, is to learn what I call needs awareness. And it's not just, oh, yeah, there they are, needs, I get it. There's a whole process that we go through, if you think about it, right, with needs, which is that first I have to understand even what they are and that they exist. Really get a grip on, oh, this is something that we're all experiencing together here. And then the next part is to even be able to see it. I call it the parallel universe of needs. So I can see it, right? And I can articulate it. I can actually give words to it. So now I can start to share my vision with people about this thing
Mm-hmm.
called needs. But wait a minute, what happens? I run into my relationship with it. And think about this. We've all had, right? I don't deserve. If I'm thinking about my needs, I'm selfish. Or if I think I have needs, I'm weak, right? We're totally redefining this now and saying, no, needs aren't about being weak. They're not about being selfish. Needs are about being alive. Needs are about being a human being alive. And we all got, it's all there for us. And so that's why I like to just,
Mm-hmm.
first develop this and get through that stage of my hangups, my personal relationship with needs.
Can I
And
reflect
then,
that, what I'm hearing so
yeah,
far? So I was hearing that, so Marshall Rosenberg was actually looking at how do I really convey, how do I teach the sort of mindset or way of being, and that what you've really kind of placed front and center is needs, kind of the term needs and the meaning of needs. So you really do sort of an exploration of what the nature of needs are, you know,
constantly.
and kind of trying to sort of define it, uh, the energies behind it, and sort of addressing maybe misconceptions of it. So it's really sort of a front and center sort of something that you bring front and center in your
Yeah.
teaching.
Yeah, so I can befriend this amazing gift that I have and the feelings that come with it as well. And again, that's another part of needs awareness is for me is feelings is are part of the whole process of developing needs awareness. And again, we all have our personal relationship with feelings. We're afraid of them or we think they're, a bad idea or, you know, that we shouldn't have them or we don't deserve them. So again, these are all things, and I think you read the book. So if you've noticed, I kind of moved through that. It's like, yeah, here it is, but we're not done yet. We really have to look at, refine, refine, refine. So there may be, I think, maybe 4 or 5 chapters just on self-empathy in the book, and it's
Well,
because we want to constantly revisit and empathy too, but really constantly visit this. And just one other thing, I know I'm talking a lot, but one other thing that we do is the course goes for a year. The thing is, and I just learned this myself, the work that we do, it really can take a while for us to make it part of our, natural kind of feeling self on a day-to-day level. And so what I figured out was the reason the compassion course is so successful is not because it's a year-long course. I figured out that it's because it never ends, actually.
mhm.
Right? Because on June 21st, it's over, but on June 22nd, the next year starts. And so many of the folks that are in the course have been in it for sometimes 10 years, 5 years, because the work that we do requires this kind of constant rehearsal and support um, from those of us who are trying to do that. And if we look at our culture, we're not going to get that support there, right? So as soon as we kind of get outside of, and I've seen this, people can go to an NVC workshop and get high as a kite, to be like, this is awesome. But then you go back, and by Tuesday, they're back. The workshop went away. And so the thing that I found so important and is really a big goal of mine is to get people over the line. I call it getting over the line, where you do this and it works. And because of that, you do it again. Not because you think you should, but because it worked. So that's a big
Yeah,
part of it.
so you have that course, so which is what the book is based on, right? So
Correct.
it's we didn't go into it too much yet. It's a year-long course. Every week you send out emails and you have group meetings and so forth that kind
Yeah.
of build on
And a
that.
monthly conference. Yeah.
And it's sort of this, and you're seeing it, it's sort of a way of being. You're kind of developing, trying to bring people into that way of being. And so you've kind of organized, what I found into, I was thinking about is that you've sort of organized around needs, the meaning of needs, as well as compassion. The course is named for compassion. I've sort of organized my mindset around empathy. The term empathy, how does it relate to different aspects of life,
Right.
And people organize around some people organize around justice or I don't know, sensuality or whatever. So you kind of
Yeah.
put something front and center. And it's just, for me, it's kind of interesting how we sort of organize. So for me, it's kind of like, oh, okay, you've got needs and compassion. How does empathy sort of fit into
Well,
this sort of
yeah.
this map, this model that you've sort of created?
It's it's the path. Empathy is literally the path to, or virtually, the path to needs awareness. That's the practice, right? Everything else is just the ideas. The practice, the pursuit, the absorption, as like that you were talking about before, the experience is all empathy. I mean, in fact, if in the course, we do a special empathy training called Empathy 101, but it is almost, I don't know how you could successfully get through the course without having an empathy buddy. Without, I just simply don't know how you do it. And so that's huge for us. It may not be the centerpiece, but it's the thing that brings us to the centerpiece. So it's absolutely critical. It's not, we can't take it out of the formula.
Okay, so I'm hearing that you're seeing empathy as sort of the path towards those needs, towards
needs awareness.
Awareness, towards the feelings and the needs, and that you're seeing that it's sort of central then to what you're doing.
Absolutely. It's the motor.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of metaphors there. The path, the motor. Very
is.
metaphorical here.
It's incredibly important.
I use the metaphor of the gateway. It's sort of like the gateway that you walk through. So, yeah. And it sounds like you have sort of, as an engineer, you're really trying to make things work in sort of practical strategies, approaches, timelines, all that kind of stuff to really make it doable and functional.
Yeah, I live to hear the words, "Thom, you changed my life." I just love that. It's just, I get so much, such a sense of meaning and purpose when that happens. I'm so grateful for that. And I'm grateful to Marshall. And, I can't really talk for too long without saying his name. I'm just so grateful for his genius, really, as I imagine you are too, that he just brought us this amazing gift, this really, I call it a tech. And it's really funny because when we were talking about it, and I told him that, I said, I think of this as technology. That night in a workshop, he says, I've been talking to Thom about technology, and I've got some technology here. And he takes out his giraffe and jackal puppets. And that was his tech. And it is our tech, right? It's our ability to notice when we're judging people, when we have enemy images. It's our ability to make a journey, to notice when that's happening, make a conscious choice that that's not potentially what we want in our lives, and to ask ourselves that question, to self-empathize, and then to be able to move from that place, right?
Well, you're mentioning Marshall Rosenberg. I actually am not really part of the NVC community. Like, I see myself sort of stepping a bit farther back to Carl Rogers,
Yes.
who, Marshall was like a grad student with Carl Rogers in Chicago or wherever it was.
Yeah.
So I see that empathic listening and the practice that he sort of developed has led to a lot of different threads in everything from focusing process to NVC to motivational interviewing, and even I don't know how much human-centered design was influenced by that, but that's
Hmm.
kind of going into the engineering design. Like, you got to empathize with the people you're designing anything for. So they're really big on empathy if you go to IDEO or the design school at Stanford. So I
Yes.
find myself more of a embracing the totality of all the schools of, that were sort of based on this foundational empathic
Yeah.
listening. And, yeah. So I,
I've always thought of you like as a specialist, really, almost. And that is that which I like because you're only doing one thing, empathy. And that's so important to be able to do that over and over again. And again, that's why I think the course is successful. We're going in 11 years. And why? Because it's always there, year after year, year after year. You're always there, Edwin, year after year. I see you.
hmm.
And and so your message is inevitably being passed along. Um, and but again, I see us as partners, whether you know it or not.
Yeah,
Um,
with the empathy, because it's sort of
yeah,
the same root of, the gateway of empathy leads to a lot of different sort of in a lot of different directions, but it
yeah,
comes back to being present, sensing those. I mean, for me, it was very moving when I just heard it's your sense of contribution, that you have this joy. I can see it's like when you contribute, you feel this sense of joy that comes out of it and the satisfaction and I imagine greater meaning, your meaning for your whole life. Like, hey, my existence sort of matters because I'm able to contribute to
yes,
to
yeah,
others.
yeah, big time, big time. Um, yeah, and just grateful to be, yeah, to be able to do that. Um, for sure. And that's why again, this work, I got to go back to Marshall. He he helped us both. I mean, I think, in terms of really getting clear on, what you could call needs-based empathy,
Mm-hmm.
or life-based empathy, very specific. And it was weird because, he didn't. It's if you look it up in the dictionary, empathy is not what we talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, Empathy is almost defined like sympathy, and so there's this. We've taken on, I think, redefining some words, which happens. It's part of culture's growing. I mean, we did that with gay. We can do that with other things. We did it with the word needs, and we're doing it with the word feelings too, and we're doing it with the word empathy. We're being crystal clear, and I love that. I want I want us to be able to be crystal clear, so that it's easier for people to recognize what's happening. Uh,
Yeah, with empathy, it gets so confusing. I interview all these academics and this, and there's these books against empathy, and it creates such a muddlement that we don't even know what we're talking about. And
exactly.
for me, it's a
Yeah.
pretty clear definition with Carl Rogers, his sort of initial, and that's sort of the thread of the definition I use. And some people, it's like, for me, maybe we can even talk about that definition is sort of being present with someone, following along. He has a metaphor of following along on their journey. You're not saying,
Hmm.
hey, no, let's go this way, or your journey is stupid, or whatever.
Right.
It's not judging. Let's go on my journey. It's like, hey, I'm on your journey. I'm accompanying you, and
Yeah.
then I do what I call a culture of empathy. Is well, let's switch. How about you follow me on my journey now, so it's more reciprocal and mutual.
Yeah.
So I think that mutuality often gets lost in a sense of individuality. It's like, oh, I just go on my journey, or others. So
Right.
I try to bring that mutuality into
Yeah.
it.
Which needs are mutual, right? So our feelings, they're universal. We all have all of them, and so every time you can do that, every time we can do that, we are opening, right? Hopefully, we're opening the communication. We're opening the connection. Um, and as an engineer, like the thing for me was empathy gives us what I'm going to call just a crystal clear vision of our own and each other's needs, right? That's the once we've got that. So that's the empathy part. So what comes after that crystal clear vision, right? What comes after we have this absolute understanding of our own and each other's needs? We start to care about each other. We have compassion. So for me, empathy engenders compassion, and compassion engenders compassionate action. And so for what I like to think of is that whenever we need connection, that we have some medicine that we can put there to help, which is exactly what we're trying to do with Black Lives Matter, right? That we're going to exchange empathy, so we can't help but understand one another. And then we can't help but want to contribute to one another. I use the idea of a little 3-year-old girl. If you found a 3-year-old girl starving in your living room, what would you do? You would feed that child, right? You would do everything you could to take care of that child. Yet there are 3-year-olds that are starving right now. Why aren't we helping them? Because we don't have the connection to have our natural, organic reaction to fellow human beings, which is that when we understand one another, when we connect and see one another, we care about one another. And so that's my game, right?
Is
My
creating
game,
that sense of care. And
that's why it's called the Compassion Course, right? Or the Compassion Book.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it's all leading, right? And what I love about compassion is that it is not compatible with starvation. It's not compatible with poverty. It's not compatible with slavery. It's not compatible with child soldiers. It's not compatible with a lot of things, and I love that about it. So many, I go back to what I was saying before, this idea of having a simple solution to a complex or a series of complex problems. Compassion. The rest is, once you've got compassion, the rest is the details.
That was one of my questions
Yeah.
before I had written down. I was really wanted to kind of explore what you see, the relationship between empathy and compassion. So you've sort of just kind of come into that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about the compassion book, the compassion course. I was kind of curious, like, why isn't it the empathy book and the empathy course? And by the way, I got the domain name Empathy Course. So
Oh, congratulations!
So I just got it a little while ago. So for our training. So I guess I was kind of really looking. So what I was hearing, you're saying there's a sense of empathy, and that sense of empathy creates a sense of care. And then from that care, you're seeing sort of compassion sort of coming out of that. And you're seeing compassion as something about taking some sort of action, maybe with care, or.
Yeah, it's compelling. It's compelling. I don't have to worry about what you're going to do after you feel compassion. I don't. I know, you know what I mean? It's like, I know something more wonderful is about to happen when us humans are having that experience. I mean, that's why every religion in the world, has co-opted compassion as part of the the culture of that religion. Everyone. I don't think there is a religion I'm aware of that doesn't have that. And so I just took it out of the religious realm. But there's maybe some little difference that I'm hearing between what we're saying, and that is, I don't think of empathy as a sense. I think of it as a practice that brings me to compassion, and that's the sense, right? That's the sense, that caring, and any of us who've experienced empathy know what that is. And again, that's the thing that I want to really, I want to break it down like a practice, like a sport, so that people can really learn to do it. Because if I think of it as a sense, then I might be worried that, maybe I just don't have the sense. And I want to be clear. Anybody who wants to can get amazingly good at this, because there are specific things to do that help us do that. And even certain ways to think and certain practices that we can do, right? Just like in a sport, we stretch. So here we exchange empathy. So that's, I don't know if that.
Yeah, so you have a lot of different exercises on how to actually kind of facilitate an empathic practice, empathic way of being, if I'm understanding that correctly. Yeah. In terms of, clarity, because there's so much muddlement. Like those are all books on empathy. Like there's 3 books. I've interviewed, most of the authors there. It's a mess. It's like, I don't know what people are talking about when they talk about empathy, right? And even Dan Batson, who studied this, he said, there's all these definitions, different meanings. Some of them are actually contradictory. So people, like the Against Empathy book is really about, you could say it's about sympathy, feeling sorry for people, or you kind of it. And actually, the things they're calling empathy are things that would actually inhibit empathy, in my view. So it is such a morass, and trying to clarify it. I always try to work to clarify it, and because so we're talking about the same thing, and usually it takes just some time to talk with each other for that clarity to kind of happen. And I know the compassion community, sometimes they get quite frustrated because it's like, empathy is this neutral thing, and only compassion is for, taking action. I totally disagree. I think empathy is very healing. When you hear somebody and you synchronize, hearing them, it actually releases oxytocin, and that's very healing. It reduces stress. So empathy is inherently constructive, even if you don't take any, thing like giving somebody money or something. And then, so there's all these kind of, it just seems like a mess. It's like, it's like, it's such a mess in terms of definitions, and how do we kind of make this simple and easy, and, you're just seeing my frustration. It's like, because, especially with the academics. The academics is like, it's very cognitive, and they're just sort of moving ideas around. And what I loved about Carl Rogers was he had the scientific as well as the 40 years of listening to people and the expert, and having a combination of those two, I think, is really important. So I was kind of a bit of a rant there, but
and I'm thinking, I just think what I'm hearing anyways, like here you are trying to do something very clear, and you're, it's on your shirt, and so who's gonna be, but so here you have this thing that you do, and you're bringing it into the world, and yet there are all these academics that aren't actually doing it,
right,
who are kind of muddying the waters for you, and making your job a little harder, in the course of doing their job, or at least they think they're bringing clarity, I'm guessing, and they're wondering. I love that. Wondering is great, and yet I'm hearing at the same time that this lack of clarity is working against you in a way.
Yeah, and I think it's working against sort of clarity within the society too. If the society if we were talking about the same things, it would just help, bring these skills across, quicker, and kind of build that more empathic society. So, but I felt really heard there. Thank you for that listening. That was, because it's frustration, and I kind of letting it out. It's good to just be heard about it.
And it's funny, get into when we're in 15 languages now, or in process, or delivering, either way. And this is where talk about language, right? like empathy, for example, or compassion means pity in many languages. In fact, in English, it means that if you look it up.
Yeah.
So again, one of these words that we're trying, right? We're trying to develop this shared reality around the word so we could stop talking about it and just understand one another and, you know, move in on that kind of on that spot. That's why I wrote the compassion course. If you look, it says nonviolent communication in there exactly 0 times. What I did say, I did quote Marshall's book, so it does have the word nonviolent communication in it. But I was, you know, very worried about the same thing you're talking about, which is to be able to create consistent clarity, and particularly in the world of certified trainers, I discovered, which I'm no longer a certified trainer, by the way, I discovered that there was such a huge difference in the understanding of what they were even doing that I was worried that, you know, it's like imagine if you went to a brain surgeon and they really just didn't know what they were doing.
And they had different names for the scalpel.
Exactly.
It's like instead of calling
it
a scalpel, they call it the chainsaw or something.
Yeah, right. There you
it's
go.
like that's what we're in exactly.
Right. So what I'm hoping to do, and I have done it successfully, but it's weird because it's only inside the Compassion Course community that we have this shared reality. But I figure we got to start somewhere because everybody was saying different things, and you know it ended up being destructive, I think, ultimately for the work. Oddly enough, just like somebody who didn't who did brain surgery with a chainsaw would be destructive to the brain surgery world, right? And so at one point, I said, "Look, let me just do this and let this course have a life of its own. And if people want to do other things, great. But let me just make sure this is here, you know, that I've been able to create this step-by-step path to get you over the line, to get you so like you could really do this and make your life more wonderful." And I think we're doing it. I mean, we've accomplished it. And so yeah, it is growing. It's continuing to grow. And I like the clarity that we have. There's very little controversy in the course. We're just more interested in getting on with it than discussing what this means or that means, because, and that's again, I just laid it out very sequentially, very clearly as best I could, and then there's the format itself, which I found really helpful, which is concept, story, practices, right? Every week, 3 things, and it's really funny because I'll read the concept and I'll go, what the hell am I talking about? But then I read the story because I edit it every year, and I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. So it's like you need that. Sometimes you really need to have that story there to show how this really shows up in life.
Seeing it from different perspectives. You got the concept, it's one perspective, the story adds another dimension, and then the practice adds still another sort of dimension.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like that, yeah, the kind of conceptual part, then there's the kind of, what's the word, like a parable, you could almost say, right? To show how this goes. And then a practice, so I get to participate firsthand in this thing that I just read about.
How long have you been doing that course now? The
11th year.
11th year. Wow. Wow. Yeah.
We were tallied up. This year we're 6,000 in the course in 15 languages. But we started out with 500 people in the course 11 years ago. And it's just boop, 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 slowly but surely has been growing. And last year, for some reason, was it's the biggest growth leap we've ever had. I don't know if, it may be because we've actually opened the course to have practice groups. I think that made a huge difference. Somewhere along the line, we went from being a course to a community. And I think that the words, a course is never long enough. There's no such thing as a course that's long enough to really have this, ongoing and really in our bones. And so I by mistake, really, I can't take credit for this really. It's just like I noticed that there was this shift happening, and that it was because the course was always there. It was always going on. And because a community is always there. Mm-hmm. And that was the difference, right? A course begins and ends, and a community just lives. And so that was the thing that I think really put us on the map the mm-hmm. way we are today.
Creating that community then kind of keeps it going. And where do you see it going? Kind of, how do you see it sort of evolving, sort of next steps over the next years?
We're paying attention to the community aspect. So one of the things like we did this year is we have a Google group that you can speak to people in different languages, so that we crisscross, which we found kind of important. A lot of people speak English, so a lot of people listen to the course as well. So I think the big thing that's happening for us is the expansion into China, the expansion into India. Those are massive, markets. And it's funny, the book also just kind of keeps plopping along. Every day I'll look down there and somebody bought my book. So that's also, I think, piece of it is I hold the rights to the book so that in a peacemaking effort, we can use the book as a peace education tool without paying money for it. So that's a big piece, by the way, of, when we're looking at kind of international and regional conflicts, peace education becomes incredibly important. Without it, there's a couple things. Number one, being involved in the process themselves, even, not just the negotiators, but to be brought into the process themselves, it was also a big piece. So that's something else mm-hmm. that we're making sure that this is accessible. That's a huge piece for me. I don't want, and to this date, nobody's been turned down ever from the course for money. I mean, if somebody, had, designs on other ideas for using the course besides learning, then we would have a problem with that. But so far, it's been amazing. I just want to be able to keep meeting the demand as it grows. And a big piece of this was that it was scalable for us, so that we never said, "Oh, well, I can't afford to do that." So we just always trying to keep it scalable, and again, affordable for people. It's, I think it's $72 this year, and you can learn a lot in the course if you're willing to put it in, stay with it. So.
Oh, great. Well, we've gone for about an hour. It might be a good time to close. It's been, I've seen you out there, for years as well, on the different community boards and, so forth. So it's great to have a chance to talk with you and just connect with you. So appreciate that, and hope we can sort of keep in contact with for any, ideas or projects or collaboration in the future.
Yeah.
We're
trying to get the politicians to do empathy circles. So my focus is the empathy circle and the empathy tent. So we're trying to get politicians to take part. My congressman said that he'd do it. So if you have any connections with politicians, let me know.
Okay. Yeah, and also I encourage politicians to take the compassion course. In fact, we're probably going to, I don't know what will happen, but we're going to send 100 books over to the Senate, see what happens.
Good idea.
But it's so, where we are in our 3 billion year history here on the planet, I think that I just love what we are doing. I think it really is. We're at this place now where it's starting to go, oh yeah, like we have to do something else because we're so good at killing each other that we've got to think of an alternative to solving conflicts. And so I'm really happy that you are out there. I'm happy that I'm able to be out there and start to change the zeitgeist to, from thinking that war could possibly be a good thing and somehow could be good for an economy. Come on. Blowing things up is not good for an economy. It's not good for people. And so I love that we have something.
Yeah.
We have an alternative. We can't just say stop doing war.
Right.
That doesn't work. We have to say start doing this. Which is why I have so much respect for you, is because years ago you said, I am going to do this. I'm not going to talk about this. And you have. I mean, I don't know, it's been easily 10 years.
Yeah, 14, 15 have been doing this. Yeah. But I do see that people are seeing that, before the polarization was up there, oh, I can kind of live with that polarization. But now it's kind of getting, this is getting serious. This could get really bad. So there's a little bit of a opening and awakeness. We'll see what happens in that space. Maybe there's kind of more cultural openness to trying new things. Empathy, so an empathic approach, a listening, more dialogic, approach.
Yeah.
So we keep working at it. And part of it is the dialogue. I think just us getting together, talking about it, connecting is like the way forward, just so to model that mutual listening and dialogue.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm actually about to teach my first course to police officers, and it's exactly that, dialogue. Cool. Dialogue is a piece of the tool set for police officers. It's a known thing, dialogue. It's like, can we use dialogue?
Right.
And
you think that's an opportunity that opened because of Black Lives Matter and all the racial kind of issues?
It is. Because, well, I am just so blessed that people find me. But I've had a retired police officer who worked with one of my students find me, and we're developing. He's trained police officers in New York City as a retired detective, but he's been on the street, and he's got an amazing track record. They actually go to get him when there's a situation, because he says, look, I know we're running out of time here. This is kind of interesting. Go cut this off if you need to.
There's no time limit.
He would say, look, here's the deal. I'll hear you out if you hear me out. That's it. He just goes, first you have to have cover. You can't do it when you're in danger, right? You have to get cover. And then once you have cover, you can now say, hey, let's talk it out. You just let me know, just please, I'll hear you out. And what does he do? He gives them empathy. He looks for the needs and reflects that. And most of the time, I think it was 9 out of 10 times, the person will surrender without any violence whatsoever. And then when that doesn't happen, when he goes and he says, well, look, I'm, if you're hearing me out, I just want you to know I'm in a pickle. I'm not even allowed to let you leave here. I'm a cop. I have to do something. What are we going to do here? Here, this is what we're going to do. And it works.
Yeah, that's a great story. It's really a model of what we need in the whole society. So great. Well, thanks. That might be a good, positive, constructive ending spot for our discussion here. So thanks a lot, Thom, for this, and to be continued. We're
totally. We'll be in touch. I've got other projects I want to talk to you about for sure.
Oh, cool. So